All right, hey again, everyone. Channel Futures editorial director Craig Galbraith here. It's another episode of Channel Futures TV. Got an opportunity today to talk with Mike Ferry. Mike is VP of Epic Solutions at Granite. Mike, how are you?
I'm great today, Craig. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to have you. So, get a chance to talk today about POTS replacement. Maybe you can start off a little bit by talking about what it is essentially and why it's getting so much attention in the telecommunications industry.
Yeah, well, I think most people by now kind of know what POTS replacement is, right? But I would say it's really replacing old analog, plain old telephone service with basically newer technology. The plain old telephone service is still delivered to fax machines, to alarms, elevators. There's certain applications that really haven't been able to move to the cloud really well. I guess the other thing is that, POTS replacement, it's kind of interesting, right? There's POTS replacement getting a lot of focus today, meaning, again, for the things I talked about, right? These little pesky POTS lines that are still remaining, but POTS replacement's actually been going on for about, gosh, a dozen or so years, right? As companies are moving more and more to the cloud, everything, 20 years ago was copper based, right? Whether it's digital or analog, but it was still copper based, right? And we've seen a prolific move to cloud-based communications, cloud-based everything really over the past 20 years. One time there was almost 200 million POTS lines in the world, or actually in the US. And, today I think we're down to, they say somewhere between 25 and 40 million still remaining. But I guess the key is POTS replacement's been going on for a really long time. It's just today is a very, very more concentrated effort to replacing specialty POTS lines that don't necessarily play very well with the solutions that were available 10 years ago, or really even today.
You bet. That's still a pretty significant number, Mike. So I've got to think there are some compliance challenges encountered with POTS replacement. So what are some of the primary ones?
Yeah. So again, we focus, with Epic, I always like to say that we are a purpose-built product, purpose-built company, really to make sure that we, compliance first, right? We built for compliance. And when I say compliance, normally when we talk about compliance, the thing that gets or the compliances that get the most attention are what we call the fire, life, and safety compliances, right? The thing about the POTS lines that are remaining, there's a reason they're remaining, right? These are lines that POTS lines work no matter what. If the electricity's off, the POTS line works. If there's a regional disaster type situation, or storms or things like that, and all the service is out, the only thing that for 100 years that always worked was still the POTS lines, right? And there's a reason for that, because they have to work no matter what. So normally in compliance, we talk about, again, fire, life, and safety. Specifically, the ones that have the most compliances are fire panel lines, right? They have to work without any vulnerabilities. And they really doesn't match very well with cloud-based solutions. But there are other compliances also, right? Besides just what we call fire, life, and safety compliances. The other compliances are again, basic communication needs, right? E911 is a compliance, right? We have to be able to, when somebody picks up a phone and then they make a 911 call, somebody needs to know where that phone call is coming from, right? So that's a compliance. In the healthcare world, right? Everything has to be HIPAA compliant, right? You have to protect the privacy of patients, right? So those phone lines, no one's thinking about those, but when you're sending a fax the reason there's still so much faxing in the medical and healthcare field is because, again, it's got to be HIPAA compliant. They have to prove that it didn't go somewhere else and put someone's information in jeopardy. PCI compliance. Right, you're familiar with PCI compliance, right? For the payment card industry, right? Again, if you're collecting somebody's financial information, you've got to meet all those different compliances. And I know they sound like silly little things, but we're in a world today in those areas where it's super important, because giving out personal information is, not only is it against the law in many cases, but it can be disruptive to people's lives and livelihoods.
Yeah, not silly at all. Definitely important, Mike. So I want to go back to one of the things you were just talking about, the emergency situation, the fire and life safety, because POTS is almost synonymous with those who respond to those types of emergencies. So maybe you can talk a little bit about specifically in the design of a POTS replacement solution, how it lends itself to the reliability and the availability requirements of that critical fire and life safety application.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably the one we answer the most every day. So, again, I go back to what I said a little earlier, that we're purpose built for that space, right? And to do, and we learned, again, everybody from the old Epic, I was one of the original Epic employees, everybody from the Epic side of our business, as a longtime industry telecom technology veteran, right? So we've been around this space. We've watched the progression from analog to digital to VoIP, and all of the layers in between, the various tentacles of those things, right? And none of us really ever planned, I think, I shouldn't say we didn't plan. We learned a lot as we went along about these POTS lines that we took for granted our whole lives, right? That how important they were and how many people were watching, these technologies, right? And again, so we learned a lot about, most importantly, what we had to learn about was what's called the National Fire Protection Agency's requirements, right? What you'll hear words like NFPA 72, that's the code. It's a several hundred-page code that talks about, everything from a communication standpoint that's, required for communications with, in fire panels. And we learned a lot about that kind of stuff. So we have a really smart CTO who figured out that the only way to really build a POTS replacement solution that was going to be as reliable as a POTS line, but still meet all the requirements, right, was to take out any vulnerability, right? The internet. If you have to use the internet to get to a cloud PBX, well, that's a vulnerability, right? If you've got a cloud out there, you'll see. If I were to show you a picture of our slides, it's a picture says 1,000 words. That our diagrams in a customer presentation show there's no cloud, right? How often do you see a presentation today in the technology world where you take the cloud out of the picture? And that's on purpose, right? Because we realized that anything that was a vulnerability was going to keep us from being as resilient as a POTS line. So again, internet, even the cloud PBX itself, right? If there's a problem with the cloud PBX and I can't get the information back, well, then I don't have a phone call, right? And of course, power, right? It's got to work without power, right? So our design is, again, it's a pretty advanced solution, right? We've got built-in battery backup. Battery backup, excuse me. It'll survive for a minimum of 24 hours on standby mode. It'll actually work up to 8 hours in under full load as well. But what's most unique, and we use a lot of the same technologies as so many other guys that are, again, replacing POTS lines, right? We have analog terminal adapters. We use the 4G wireless services. We use we use some Ethernet connectivity, again, call pass through the internet. A lot of the stuff that's been around for a while. What's most different, significantly different, our key differentiators is that our CTO realized that those were vulnerabilities. And we built our device we call it onboard intelligence. We basically put a computer motherboard inside every Epic device where we locally run our class 5 or our carrier grade PBX right inside the device. And then we worked with the wireless carriers, and we had some help from the wireless carriers. They were really interested in kind of giving us a head start along the way back, 7 or 8 years ago. And we got private APN peering connections with the wireless carriers, right? So in essence, what we did was we took a POTS line, we took the replacement of a POTS line with something that was the equivalent replacement of a POTS line because it's a direct connection right to the PSTN, again, without having to interface at all with that cloud PBX, right? Very, very, very unique. Again, our CTO was a really smart guy. And we actually, by the way, we have a patent on that technology, right? The intelligence in the device, we have that as a patented technology.
That's terrific, Mike. So you talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious about any other recent updates to regulatory standards that are affecting POTS replacements.
So, national regulatory requirements. I think don't quote me on this. I'm not an expert. We have a lot of people who are experts on regulatory requirements, but I believe it's every 2 years that NFPA and the NFPA 72 is actually amended. So that's but there's always some kind of regulatory requirements that are taking place on more local levels, right? When it comes to people's lives and safety, right? So you see that, every jurisdiction, right? The fire marshal, they call them AHJs, or the authorities having jurisdiction, right? In different cities, different towns, they all make, large cities, counties. There's a lot of different, localized regulations that do change on a pretty regular basis. But the governing body is going to be the National Fire Protection Agency for the most part. And we find that most of the AHJs in those jurisdictions kind of for every state pretty much follow the national guidelines. Just one interesting thing though is we actually, from a compliance standpoint, it's not a requirement, but this is a new technology for the fire marshal, right? They're used to specific devices that are very fire panel specific. that are, through the cellular networks connecting to their devices. And we built something different. We built a carrier CO that's working behind the scenes, connecting to all the different POTS lines. So we had a lot of explaining to do along the way. And while it's not a requirement at any level, we actually picked the two biggest fire departments in the country. Two biggest, and I'd say most discerning fire departments in the country. That's CAL FIRE, 45 million people or so in California, and the FDNY, the fire department of the city of New York. And we went through voluntary testing to get actual official certification as what they call a managed facilities-based voice network. And so we've got that on file. It was, again, 100% voluntary thing, but it was worth it for us because we wanted to show anybody who ever asked the questions about compliance that, we had a rubber stamp for use in fire, life, and safety lines across the country.
I love your passion about POTS, Mike. Definitely.
Yeah. Who knows?
So let's drill down on the channel a little bit. How does Granite Channels help partners navigate this POTS replacement opportunity?
Yeah, well, Granite's, I think that's really the key, right? Granite has an awesome channel program. Well, a couple of things too, right? We've got channel managers in every major market, and those channel managers are supported by regional directors who actually work with the customers, help on quotes, have a very, very large support staff to work with partners. Again, we support, it's probably about 50% more, almost 50% of Granite's business now on a $2 billion company, right? So channels is our number one really our number one focus. And, the channel folks are awesome. And the advantage in this, Granite sells a lot of different stuff, but the big advantage, I think, of Granite, using Granite channels in this environment is, Granite really kind of cut its teeth in the POTS line business, right? We were always kind of the biggest aggregator of POTS lines in the country. So now the natural transition from, older technology to new technology with guys who really understand both, it's kind of a no-brainer.
You bet. Mike, thanks for your time today on Channel Futures TV. I really enjoyed learning what Granite is doing with POTS replacement.
You're welcome. Thanks for the time.